Ladies and gentlemen, fear is not your captor, it is your catalyst, and once you confront it, command it, and crush it, you don't just escape the cage, you become the storm that was never meant to be contained. Fear is not a monster hiding in the shadows, it is the shadow, and it lives within you, within me, within every human being who has ever dared to dream bigger than their current condition. It's the silent assassin of progress, the quiet whisper in your mind that says, "You can't, you're not ready, you'll fail." And too often people listen, not realizing that fear is not the voice of wisdom, it is the voice of surrender, the voice of chains, the voice of every untapped potential begging for release but being suffocated under the weight of imagined outcomes and false narratives. Fear is the enemy that doesn't knock on your door but hides behind your thoughts, slips into your decisions, poisons your confidence, and builds invisible prisons that trap your future before you even take your first step. It is not courage that most men lack, it is the clarity to recognize that their inaction is not caution but cowardice dressed as logic. It's fear that makes you scroll endlessly instead of building, that makes you doubt yourself instead of daring, that makes you choose safety over sovereignty, approval over authenticity, silence over impact. Fear is the thief of greatness, and it doesn't need to defeat you, it only needs to delay you long enough that you never begin, because fear feeds on your hesitation. It grows every time you sit still, every time you swallow your truth, every time you procrastinate on the work you were born to do. Most people will never realize that the dragon they're running from is not in front of them, it's in their own mind, and unless they stand up and walk through the fire of discomfort, they will live forever in the cold cave of regret, wondering what could have been if they had just said yes to the fight within. Fear does not disappear when you wish it gone, it dies when you confront it, when you name it, when you do the thing it told you not to do, when you wake up at 5 a.m. and build, when you speak even though your voice trembles, when you chase the dream even if your hands shake. Because that is how warriors are forged, not in the absence of fear but in the presence of it, not by running from the enemy but by turning and walking straight through it like fire. Greatness is on the other side of what you fear, and the people who reach it are not fearless, they are simply those who refuse to bow. They see fear and act anyway, they feel doubt and decide anyway, they hear the screaming voices of anxiety and still take the step forward. Because that step is where identity is built, that step is where you stop being a prisoner and start becoming the master of your fate, and the longer you wait to take it, the more power you give to your enemy, and the more powerless you feel in the war for your life. But there comes a day, a moment, a flicker of awakening where you stop waiting, stop blaming, stop making peace with your pain and instead declare enough, and in that moment you become unstoppable, not because you have no fear but because you finally know who you are in spite of it. Fear cannot hold a man who remembers he was born to rule it, who looks his limitations in the eye and says not today, who refuses to allow emotion to dictate execution, who disciplines his mind to act according to purpose, not pressure. Understand this truth, fear has no strength without your agreement, no voice without your attention, no chains without your surrender. It is a phantom made real only by your belief, and the second you rise above it, the second you take your power back, the illusion shatters. History does not remember the ones who were afraid, it remembers the ones who did it anyway, who dared to build when others ran, who created when others criticized, who stood tall when the storm howled. And you have that same fire inside of you, the same unbreakable spirit that has lit the souls of warriors, inventors, leaders, and legends, but you must choose it, feed it, defend it daily from the sabotage of fear, because fear doesn't vanish after one victory, it waits, it evolves, it lurks, but so does your strength, so does your resilience, and if you train your mind like a soldier, build your discipline like armor, move every day toward your mission like a lion stalking its destiny, then fear will shrink in your presence, and success will become inevitable. Don't expect the road to be easy, expect it to demand your everything, your sweat, your blood, your truth, because that's what the war against fear requires, not comfort but courage, not wishes but will, not more time but more decisions, and every decision you make to act in the face of fear rewrites your identity. Every moment of bravery reprograms your brain. Every courageous choice stacks until one day you look in the mirror and no longer see a victim of fear, you see a force that fear itself fears. So I ask you now, what are you waiting for? The perfect moment? It doesn't exist. The absence of fear? It never comes. The right time is the first step you take while afraid, because that's the only real time there is. Fear is the enemy within, and if you do not defeat it, it will defeat you slowly, silently, over years, over decades, one unspoken word, one missed opportunity, one unlived dream at a time, until one day your future becomes a graveyard of what could have been, and you will be forced to wonder what kind of life you might have lived had you chosen bravery instead of bondage. But if you rise, if you take command of your mind and charge into the unknown with your fists clenched around purpose, then fear will lose its grip, your spirit will awaken, and the world will feel your roar echo through time, not as as another soul swallowed by doubt, but as a creator, a warrior, a legend who remembered that fear was never stronger than your will to win. Confrontation, the divine collision between the life you were meant to live and the fear that tries to keep you from it, is not a mere moment of decision. It is the sacred battlefield where character is revealed, destiny is forged, and cowards are separated from conquerors. It is the spiritual fistfight between your highest self and your most destructive thoughts, and every time you delay it, you give power to the very enemy you were born to destroy. Fear thrives in avoidance, it multiplies in hesitation, and it feeds on your silence. But the moment you rise and confront the thing you've been running from, the doubt, the trauma, the weakness, the failure, the broken dream, something begins to awaken in you that cannot be accessed by comfort, only through combat. Confrontation is not about aggression, it's about alignment, about standing tall in front of everything that says you can't, and replying with "watch me," because until you confront your internal resistance, you will always be enslaved by external limitations. You will never build the life you crave if you keep making peace with what was sent to destroy you. Never rise into your greatness if you keep negotiating with your demons. Never walk into freedom if you keep running from the war inside. Understand this, fear doesn't live in facts, it lives in feelings, and feelings change the moment you confront them, the moment you drag them out of the darkness and into the light of your courage, where they dissolve not because they were never real, but because they were never stronger than your decision to act. Confrontation is not optional if you want greatness, it is the gateway, the spiritual threshold every champion must walk through, the test you must pass if you ever want to look in the mirror and see a giant instead of a ghost. People talk about wanting transformation, but they forget that confrontation precedes transformation. You cannot evolve into power without going to war with the part of you that clings to safety, that shrinks when challenged, that would rather hide in potential than risk failure in pursuit of purpose. And yes, confrontation is painful, uncomfortable, violent even, not in the physical sense but in how it shatters illusions, how it forces you to dismantle the stories you've used to justify your fear, how it demands that you face the mirror without excuse and own every part of your existence, every flaw, every choice, every truth you buried beneath convenience. But on the other side of that pain is freedom, and on the other side of that freedom is power. The kind of power that doesn't scream, but moves silently, intentionally, like a lion that no longer fears the jungle, because it knows it was born to rule it. You were not designed to walk through life bending to your fears. You were built to stand, to challenge, to break the mold, to burn the false self to ashes and rise in the fire of your own will. But to do that, you must confront the false gods of fear, the fear of failure, the fear of judgment, the fear of rejection, the fear of not being enough. They are all illusions, masks worn by the enemy within to keep you tame. But you were not made to be tame. You were made to be dangerous in the best way, dangerous to mediocrity, dangerous to limitation, dangerous to the chains of doubt that have held generations in bondage. And when you choose confrontation, when you look fear in the face and take a step forward anyway, you shift the atmosphere around you. You send a signal to your soul that you are no longer the victim of your mind. You are the master of it. You are no longer a wanderer hoping for change. You are the architect of it, no longer a slave to emotion, but a force that moves with conviction, with ferocity, with unshakable resolve. Confrontation is the choice to stop waiting for a better time and become the better version of yourself now, through pressure, through fire, through intentional war against anything that dares to dim your light. And once you walk that path, once you step into confrontation, something irreversible happens. You become addicted to truth, allergic to excuse, obsessed with growth, and immune to fear because you've seen what you're capable of when you no longer run, when you no longer hide, when you finally say, "This ends now." The people who win in life are not the ones who feel the least fear. They're the ones who have trained their spirit to stand in the storm of fear and move anyway, to confront every limitation, not once but daily, to confront weakness with discipline, to confront distraction with clarity, to confront stagnation with motion, to confront noise with silence, to confront pain with purpose, and to confront life not as a passive observer, but as a conscious creator who commands their direction and defines their identity by the battles they're willing to fight. You must understand this. Confrontation is not a single event. It is a lifestyle, the daily rebellion against everything that tells you to settle, the sacred vow to never let comfort become your god, the conscious rejection of the easy path in favor of the necessary one. And yes, it will require everything from you, but in giving everything you become everything, because what you get in return is not just success, but self-respect, not just achievement, but alignment, not just applause but internal thunder, the sound of a soul that knows it's finally free, finally alive, finally whole, because it no longer bows to fear, it confronts it, overcomes it, and walks through it like a king claiming his throne. Courage, not the absence of fear, but the audacity to rise in the face of it, to move through fire while your knees still shake, and your heart still trembles, is the foundational force that separates the dreamers from the doers, the average from the extraordinary, the forgotten from the legendary. It is not born in ease, but carved in adversity, not grown in peace, but forged in the furnace of conflict, where your soul is tested, your mind is stripped of illusion, and your spirit is called to either submit or step up. You don't stumble into courage, you decide it, you command it, you become it,
through the relentless discipline of doing the hard thing when every voice in your head tells you to wait, to stop, to stay small. Courage is not something you summon once and win forever. It is the daily decision to choose growth over comfort, purpose over paralysis, and truth over the lies your fear tries to sell you every time you stand at the edge of greatness. Understand this: your life will not be defined by the talents you were born with. It will be defined by your courage to use them, to expose them to the world without apology, to risk criticism, rejection, failure, and still press forward. And this is where most people fold, because they mistake courage for confidence, not realizing that courage must be chosen before confidence arrives, not after. It is the spark that ignites the fire, the engine that drives you through the unknown. And if you wait to be ready, if you wait to be fearless, you will wait forever, because courage doesn't show up when you feel strong. It shows up when you feel weak but act anyway. The man who builds an empire is not braver than you. He simply refused to let his fear win the final vote. And that is the real battlefield, not in the world but in your mind, where doubt wrestles with destiny, where hesitation strangles hope, where every step forward feels like a war. And yet if you move despite that war, you win, because courage is not proven in safety. It is proven in the storm. It is seen when you stand alone and still don't fold, when you speak even though your voice shakes, when you try again after the world told you to quit. Courage is the reason legends rise, movements begin, and broken men are rebuilt into giants, not because they didn't fall, but because they chose to rise again and again and again. There is no greatness without pain, no freedom without fear, and no transformation without sacrifice. And courage is what drives you to make that sacrifice when it hurts, when it's uncertain, when you have every excuse to sit still but every reason to keep going. And yes, the cost of courage is high: isolation, resistance, rejection, failure. But the cost of cowardice is higher: regret, bitterness, resentment, a lifetime of wondering what if, a life unlived, a fire that dies before it ever lights the world. If you want to know what it takes to truly lead your life, to claim your power, to create something that lasts, it's not just vision, not just strategy, not even talent. It is raw, relentless, unwavering courage, the kind that keeps moving when it's hard, that keeps building when it's quiet, that keeps showing up when nobody is clapping, because you know who you are, and you know what you came to do. Courage makes you dangerous not to others, but to the mediocrity that once lived inside you, to the old identity that used to hold you back, to the weak version of yourself that you've outgrown but haven't buried. And once you choose courage, truly choose it, you become a weapon against the world's attempts to make you small. Fear becomes fuel, failure becomes data, and pain becomes the price you willingly pay for freedom, because courage is the currency of progress. Nothing changes without it, nothing is built without it, nothing lasts without it. And the most powerful truth you'll ever realize is this: you already have it. The courage, the strength, the fire, the warrior within. It is not missing, it is dormant, buried beneath years of conditioning, silence, fear, doubt, and it is waiting for one moment. The moment you stop running from challenge and start choosing it, the moment you stop asking what if I fail, and start declaring, even if I do I rise again, the moment you stop needing permission, and start walking into the storm with your fists clenched around purpose, and your heart burning with resolve, because the world doesn't need more opinions, it needs examples, it needs people who move, who build, who lead, who act not when it's safe but when it's necessary, and you become that example when you commit to courage as a way of life, not a one-time act but a daily stand. And when you do, the fear that once ruled you will kneel before you, because no enemy can defeat the one who is no longer afraid to fight, no storm can stop the one who no longer fears the rain, and no failure can break the one who keeps choosing courage until courage becomes second nature, instinct, blood, breath, identity, and that unshakable version of you, the one that doesn't need the world to understand, agree, or applaud, that version of you is who you've always been, beneath the surface, beneath the noise, beneath the scars, and the only way to become him is through courage, fierce, unapologetic, untamed courage, discipline, the bridge between your potential and your power, the silent commander of transformation, is not a trait you're born with. It is a choice you make when your emotions scream for escape but your purpose demands execution. It is the iron will to do what must be done, especially when you don't feel like it, because you understand that feelings are fleeting, but results are permanent. Discipline is not glamorous, it's not loud, it's not celebrated. It happens in the early hours, in the unseen hours, in the hours where no one is watching, where no applause is coming, where no hand is offered, only the mirror, the grind, and the voice within whispering, do it anyway. It is the refusal to negotiate with weakness, the ability to drag yourself through resistance even when your body aches and your mind wants to rest, because discipline is not about comfort, it is about alignment with your mission, and that mission demands everything from you, not once, not sometimes, but every day. And while motivation is temporary and inspiration is emotional, discipline is spiritual. It is the soul's rebellion against the chaos of distraction, the fire inside a focused mind that knows freedom is not given, it is earned through routine, through order, through relentless repetition in the dark until mastery emerges in the light. You do not rise by accident, You rise by design, and that design is written in the ink of discipline. Wake up early, train your body, train your mind, feed your goals and starve your excuses. Do what others won't so you can live how others can't. Because while the world is chasing comfort, you are building character, and character is the one thing no one can take from you. Fear can rattle your cage, pain can break your body, failure can test your will, but discipline keeps you standing, keeps you moving, keeps you becoming, even when everything inside you says stop. And the greatest lie fear ever told you was that you need to feel ready to move. No, you just need to move, and discipline is what trains you to act without permission, without emotion, without delay. Because delay is the death of destiny, and hesitation is the thief of greatness. You want confidence, earn it through discipline. You want strength, build it through discipline. You want peace, create it through discipline. Everything you crave lies on the other side of doing the work you resist. And until you build the habit of doing what's hard, you will live a life that's easy, and an easy life always leads to regret. So train yourself to choose pressure, to love structure, to pursue resistance, not because it's comfortable, but because that is where the man you were born to be lives. In the fire, in the silence, in the places where no one claps but everything grows. Discipline doesn't speak, it proves. It proves your hunger, your priorities, your intention and your resilience, and every day you obey it. You stack wins, build momentum, forge a mindset that becomes unshakable, not because it doesn't break, but because it knows how to rebuild faster every time it falls. And when the world collapses, when fear rises, when failure strikes, it will not be your talent that saves you. It will be your discipline, the routines you built, the focus you drilled, the habits you bled for, the structure you carved in chaos, and that is what will carry you when nothing else can. Because discipline is the foundation of freedom, the engine of execution, and the only true power that never lies. It only delivers identity, the unseen force that dictates your decisions, your destiny, and your limits is not just who you are, it's who you believe you are. And until you confront that internal truth, you will always operate beneath your true potential, not because you aren't capable, but because you've accepted a version of yourself built by fear, failure, trauma, and repetition. You see, fear doesn't just hold you back, it rewrites you from the inside out. And every time you back down from your dream, you're not just losing an opportunity, you're reinforcing a false identity. You're telling your brain, this is who I am, someone who hesitates, someone who waits, someone who shrinks. And over time that story becomes your identity, and that identity becomes your prison. But here is the raw, liberating truth. Identity is not fixed, it is not fate, it is forged, it is shaped by your habits, molded by your standards, and sculpted by your decisions. In the moments when fear stands in your way, and you choose to act anyway, you do not become powerful by speaking affirmations in the mirror. You become powerful by showing up when it's hard, by building habits that align with the future version of you, by doing what must be done until your current self has no choice but to evolve into the warrior that fear can no longer recognize. And every time you take action against fear, every time you face what terrifies you, every time you say no more to the version of you that procrastinates, that settles, that lives in shadows, you are rewriting your identity in real time. You are burning the blueprint of the past and drafting a new legacy built on action, integrity, and vision. You must understand this: the way you see yourself is the ceiling of your life. You will never build higher than the identity you believe you are worthy of. And that's why fear attacks the mind first. Because if it can make you believe you're weak, it doesn't need to beat you physically. You'll sabotage yourself before the world ever has a chance to. But you can change that, not with talk, not with hype, but with transformation from the inside out. By setting new standards, by asking, what would the strongest version of me do right now? And doing it again and again until your brain rewires and your soul catches fire. And when your identity rises, everything around you changes. Your words, your posture, your discipline, your environment, your associations, your decisions. Because the man who sees himself as a warrior doesn't negotiate with excuses, doesn't shrink when challenged, doesn't bow when pressure rises. He steps forward, he owns the moment, he becomes the storm. You are not your past, you are not your pain, you are not the names they gave you, the scars they left on you, or the mistakes you've made. You are whatever you decide to become the moment you realize that identity is a weapon, not a wound. Most people walk through life with borrowed identities from parents, from friends, from society, from pain, and they wonder why they feel lost, disconnected, powerless. But you, if you choose, can take it all back. You can look in the mirror and declare war on every lie that's ever been programmed into your soul, and replace it with truth, with strength, with fire, with absolute clarity about who you are and what you came to do. Because once your identity shifts, your world can't help but follow. You will walk differently, talk differently, live differently, and people won't recognize you. But that's exactly the point. You didn't come here to be recognized by who you were. You came here to become who you were born to be. Liberation, true soul-deep liberation, is not merely the absence of chains. It is the presence of power within, the unshakable state of being, where fear no longer owns your choice.
where you refuse to be a hostage to fear any longer, where you look at your life and scream, no more, not as a whisper but as a war cry, a soul declaration that says, I will not die with my greatness buried beneath comfort. Fear has built invisible walls around you for years, convincing you to play small, act humble, blend in, wait for permission, but liberation is when you stop waiting and start walking, when you break those walls with one bold, terrifying, courageous step at a time until the world that once trapped you begins to crumble under the weight of your rising power. And understand this, liberation is not easy, it's not passive, and it's not given, it's earned through fire, through sweat, through the spiritual violence of saying yes to growth when it hurts, yes to purpose when it costs, yes to truth when it offends, because you cannot be free and comfortable at the same time. Most people are not in bondage because of chains on their wrists, they're in bondage because of fear in their minds, and until you do the work to rip that fear out by the roots, you will live your life in quiet submission to mediocrity, in silent agreement with your limitations, and you will call it realistic or practical, but the truth is, you were never meant to be tamed. Liberation is the return to your original design, the warrior, the builder, the creator, the leader, who was born to expand, to command, to speak with fire, and move with force, and the only thing standing between you and that version of you is fear, and when you finally decide to confront that fear, not later but now, not softly but completely, that's when you begin to taste what it means to be free. It's not the money, it's not the fame, it's not applause, it's the quiet thunder of walking through life knowing you do not answer to fear anymore, that your decisions are not dictated by doubt but by vision, by faith, by design. Liberation is waking up every morning and knowing you are no longer bound by your past, that your mistakes do not define you, that your trauma does not own you, that your failures are not a sentence but a lesson, and the moment you take your story back, fear loses its grip and your future expands. You walk differently when you're free, you speak differently, you breathe differently, cause you are no longer navigating life to avoid pain, you are walking directly into your purpose, and pain simply becomes the toll you pay for progress. True liberation means you are no longer triggered by people's opinions, no longer imprisoned by expectations, no longer reduced by rejection, because you've met yourself at the deepest level and decided that no one else gets to determine your worth, your power, your value, or your direction. And when you reach that level of clarity, when the chains of fear, guilt, and shame finally fall, the world will not recognize you, but that doesn't matter because you will recognize you, and that is the first moment you truly come alive. Liberation is when you reclaim the pen and start writing your life from a place of intention and not reaction, when you no longer live based on what happened to you but on what's waiting through you, and fear will still whisper, still try to return, but it will be too late, because once the soul has tasted its own power, it